I don't know the answer to that, but I know that there were some regulatory barriers in terms of the company working with the FDA. That's what I heard. I was not directly involved, so I don't really know. I do know that Roche has a very strong presence in the United States, and it's very public knowledge that Roche, because of this study, has now exercised its right to develop this drug, and they have a large number of sites in the United States. So for example, I'm working with them for a Parkinson's disease drug, and that's a worldwide effort. So they're a much larger company than Ionis, and they have a worldwide presence, and so we're hoping that the next stages of the development will involve US sites.
When you're done with your talk, I can say a couple things about London and Roche and
It's appropriate now. You want to, if there's whatever's public that you can tell us.
Yeah, I will tell you, with this data, so when we met with Dr. Ed Wild and Sarah Tabrizi, I was in London last month. I was one of 6 people that represented HDSA for a new initiative called HD COPE. It stands for Coalition of Patient Engagement. And so we got to meet the 2 doctors in London that, did this clinical trial. And yes, they were very emphatic to say, we're not saying that this is a cure by means or anything like that, just exactly what Dr. Frank is showing. And again, they said, that all of the people, even though it was the, doing it by lumbar puncture, again, yes, there was nobody dropped out, even though maybe people aren't thrilled to, that is the way for it to be administered, but, and that you did have to live very close or within a reasonable geographic area, of the clinical study site, but that they are certainly very dedicated, and just like you, Sam, that nobody is giving up on this, and they're trying to pursue it as far as they can. And that, I guess basically the biggest thing that I can say about Roche and Honest is that, again, they are extremely dedicated. They are trying to develop the best clinical trials that they can worldwide. They can't promise, how many people, where, or when, but that they're extremely excited, and, that they're trying to learn as much as they can from the families and develop the best clinical trial that they can, because they don't want people dropping out, and, that they're just very, very dedicated and very excited about what I can say. But you could really, we spent about 8 hours with them, and they asked a lot of questions, give and take. They were very sincere.
And it's percolating through the company too, because I was talking with some people from Roche about our Parkinson's study, and I mentioned that I did work with Huntington's disease, and they said, "Oh, we're doing more work with Huntington's disease. Is that something you're interested in?" I think they had no idea who they were talking to. So yes, I did let them know I was interested. But clearly, even at that level, they're starting to let the entire company know we're developing programs for Huntington's disease. So, and that's their US-based team. So I think that it's likely to be in the US for the next phases, but I have no direct involvement, so that's speculation on my part.
And at some point while I was in London, and it was said, and I don't remember, which day, where, who said what, that there's like over 75 companies in the world, research and pharmaceutical companies, that are all very interested in HD and trying to develop, drugs that are in the pipeline, whether they ever succeed or not. But the point is that, 30 years ago when John was diagnosed, nobody was doing anything. So the fact that it's worldwide, this many companies, is also a very positive.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you had a question.
Yeah, just like, worst case scenario, if the drug never does come to the US, how long typically, like, with the rest of the trial phase, including like safety testing and stuff like that, like typically take in order, until it's like ready, for the public?
So I mean, I can only speak really for the FDA development. I don't really know how Health Canada and the European Health Agency works in terms of their timelines and their development. But this is a phase 1, phase 2. So phase 1 means that it's the first in humans, it's a dose ranging finding study, and it's usually very small numbers that are focused on safety. That's in general phase 1. And there can be phase 1A, 1B, there's all kinds of other stuff, but in general, phase 1, first in human, dose ranging, focused solely on safety. Phase 2 is the first where there's a placebo controlled, and there's a hint looking at efficacy. It's small numbers, but really that's the first time that they're truly looking at efficacy. And that's one of the reasons that this was considered phase 1, phase 2, because it was first in humans, really. It was a dose ranging and focused on safety, but also had placebo controlled and looking at some outcome measures, specifically the level of mutant huntingtin. So the next phase should be a phase 2, perhaps a phase 3, depending on the guidance from regulatory perspective. And that's going to be a much larger trial, placebo controlled, 1 or 2 doses. My guess is that they would use 90 and 120 to see if there's a difference between those two. And then look to see, does it work? Does it lower mutant huntingtin? And then over a longer period of time, are we doing anything to the disease in some way? Are we addressing symptoms? Is there a difference in terms of the progression of the disease? Is there a difference in terms of other biological markers that give us a clue about what may be going on inside the body? Whether it's different blood tests or x-rays or other tests in the spinal fluid beyond the mutant huntingtin levels. So that's the general course, and it can take years for that to happen. It'll take another, let's say that they were doing something in the US, and let's say they were going right to a phase 3, which is a possibility, especially in orphan diseases that does happen. And so let's say that's happening. It's going to take a year or so to have that protocol in place and jump through a lot of the regulatory hoops. It'll probably take, I'm going to guess, a year to recruit for a study like that. Although if there's tremendous outpouring, it could be faster than that, but call it a year. And then people are going to be in the study 1 to 2 years, somewhere in that ballpark, call it, 18 months, somewhere in between, and looking at the change over time. And then they have to close the database, get everybody out of it, analyze it, and submit it for regulatory purposes. So we're talking probably 3 to 4 years. If everything goes perfectly smooth. So 5 years is probably more typical, but that's kind of the timeline that we're